We have John Gorton from our School Improvement Unit team here to host this session. He's the School Improvement Unit Manager and with the Department of Special Education. And he is going to talk about multi-state alternative assessments. And I think you're going to throw in some IEP tips too, John?
Not much.
Not much. Okay.
But I can certainly we can certainly have some question and answer kinds of stuff if time allows. Yep.
Okay, and I will monitor the chat. So if anything comes up, I'll just interject. But please, anybody, feel free to raise your hand or ask John questions as they come up. So John, I'm going to let you take over.
All righty. Thank you so much, Ann. And hello, friends. How are you all? I hope everybody's doing okay today. Getting ready for a little bit of cold weather coming, but
getting ready, dude. We already got it.
Yeah, it's coming, right?
No, it's already here.
Where are you at, Dawn?
Oh, I'm so sorry. I didn't know you could hear me.
No, it's okay. All right. So we, just asking, I guess, for, there's a good example. Just please be sure you mute yourself and unmute if you have any questions for me. And again, of course, as Ann mentioned, if you have any questions, you can certainly plug them into the chat and we'll try to get to those as best we can. As Ann said, I am the School Improvement Unit Manager for the Department of Special Education. I oversee a dynamic team of fantastic people. A few of which are on today with us would be Alicia Herman, Chris McCrae, Desiree Johnson, Katie Mattingly, and Mercy Sislo. Those are my team, and they are the primary push for the school, the statewide monitoring program that we currently have. That is one of the hats I get to wear in this role as a School Improvement Unit Manager. It is overseeing and ensuring compliance with IDEA and all of that fun stuff. So today what we're going to do is we're going to talk a little bit about, we're going to spend the majority of our time talking about the multi-state alternative assessment, what that looks like today, as well as what that might look like in the future as the state is transitioning over to a different assessment from the SBAC assessment that we all so much appreciate and enjoy that time of year when those windows are open. So we'll jump right into this, and here's kind of a look at the highlights. What we're gonna really kind of talk about today, historical perspective of assessments and so on, along with eligibility. We'll talk quite a bit about that. Some of the test administrator requirements or TA requirements, and then what might be a new thing for many of us in the world of special ed is the early stopping rule and promotion of that. And then hopefully we'll have some time at the end for any kind of Q&A that there might, any additional things like shortcuts or special ed IEP kinds of things we might be able to get to. As you all know, historically, it all started with No Child Left Behind. That's what kind of got us to where we are today. And then there was the Every Student Succeeds Act, and that created kind of where we are today with the assessments. And so we have just a little bit of format kinds of questions here. First off, we got 34 CFR 200.6. For those of us who aren't in the know, 34 stands for, this is from the federal guidance that we have to follow. 34 stands for the area of education. The 200 section is improving academic achievement of the disadvantaged. And then 0.6 is a subpart of that area that then dives into improving the basic programs for all LEAs. What that particular law describes is that basically saying that all students with significant cognitive disabilities are provided the opportunity to participate in the state assessments. There was a period of time that is now gone where an opt-out was or is an option. It is not an option. It is a law that says that everybody has to at least have opportunity.
Di ko marinig, ha?
Sorry? Did I miss something?
No, someone just wasn't muted.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Val. So that's kind of the foundational piece there, is that we have to include all students, and that all students have the ability to participate in the statewide assessments, that their peers otherwise would also have that. They just have to have equal access to that. Then it kind of narrows down from the federal to the Montana Code annotated. Again, here the 20, similar to the 34, the 20 is the education piece. And then 9 and the 309 are just subsections. The rule states that schools are obligated to ensure special or equal access to services and programs, including inclusion in a safe environment, free from discrimination. Every child has the right to an education and must be afforded the same educational opportunities. That stands true also then for the assessments as well. And then it narrows down a little bit more into the administrative rule. And from there, we have, I gotta get my mugshot out of the way. There we go. From there, we have 1056-104. Schools shall administer statewide assessments with or without accommodations based upon individual student needs. And the IEP team shall determine if the student meets eligibility. And that's primarily for the alternative assessment, it is determined whether or not they are eligible for the alternative assessment, to participate in the alternative assessment or the regular assessment with accommodations. Those are the only two options. There's not another that says you can go around it, unless, of course, you are medically excused from taking the test. And that primarily means that you would be bedridden, unable to come to school to participate with that test due to medical reasons. Within the OPI framework, we have an eligibility guidance document that provides just some basic one-on-one sorts of stuff as far as how to administer the alternative assessment for students that are eligible to take it. There's also a YouTube link here that is available that helps talk you through that process as well. And then the state alternative assessment eligibility worksheet, that is considered the appendix. I believe that's considered Appendix A in this document. It is available on the OPI website under assessments. Any questions so far? Okay. So this is the area that really comes down to, you have a student these are the population of student that is typically referenced to the alternative assessment are students with severe cognitive disabilities. That could be that typically, not in every case, but typically looks like students who are cognitive delay, severe autism, perhaps, as well as perhaps a traumatic brain injury. That's not all inclusive, but those are the typical diagnoses that we look for in that eligibility determination. So you have these 4 questions that when you click alternative assessment in the IEP, these 4 questions pop up. Student has a significant cognitive ability. If the answer is yes, you go on to number 2. Student has an adaptive or an active IEP and receives services under IDEA. Pretty simple. That's why we're there. We're doing the IEP, correct? And then number 3, student demonstrates cognitive abilities and adaptive behavior required for adjustments to the general curriculum. That looks like modifications. That looks like different curriculum, maybe different grading criteria, and is typically a life skills sort of a setting for students. If you can answer yes to number 3, then you can go on to number 4. Student requires direct and extensive instruction to acquire, maintain, and generalize any new information. Again, along those lines, if you answer yes to all 4 of those, then the student is now eligible or deemed eligible to be able to take the alternative assessment. If at any one of those comes out as, well, I don't know, it's questionable, and you come up with a no for an answer, then you are automatically plugged into, you're no longer eligible for the alternative assessment. You are eligible to take the regular assessment, with accommodations, of course. So the IEP team needs to go through these questions, and there is, within that document that I just referenced a couple slides ago, there is also this slide is this information is available in there. It's asking the same questions, similarly just presented a little bit differently. Does the student records indicate disability or multiple disabilities that most significantly impact the intellectual function and adaptive behavior? Yes, and you can read that. That is all there, and that those are similar questions as to what pops up in the IEP. We've been in the process, as far as OPI goes, we've been in the process of trying to get these the verbiage to be identical to what shows up in the IEP when you get to those drop-down questions. And I'm not sure. I think we're pretty darn close, but it could always be improved upon. Before I get into that, then there is also that Appendix A I mentioned back here at this slide, statewide eligibility. In this document, there is an Appendix A, which is a worksheet for your IEP teams to be able to actually go through and talk their way through, while you as the case manager or the person on the computer are able to answer the questions, either yes or no kinds of things based upon those discussions. Appendix A does not need to be attached to the IEP. Appendix A is just intended to be a tool to help with defining the yes or no, defining those questions for the team. So it is there. It is a tool that is intended to be of help for the team. And for the most part, once a student is eligible, deemed eligible for alternative assessment participation, chances are they are for the duration. So for subsequent years thereafter. That determination typically would happen, would be the 3rd grade IEP. And because that's the statewide assessment is administered to all students grades 3 through 8. And 11. And so the alternate assessment applies in every one of those, during every one of those years. Other years it is not. So you would just mark as not appropriate. You don't leave it blank, you just put not appropriate. Any questions? If anybody on my team has anything they'd like to add, please feel free to interject. Thank you. So we get into some non-examples of that very first question is significant cognitive disabilities that severely impairs the ability or the performance of the student. I'm providing this list of non-examples. This is also in that same guidance document I just mentioned a bit ago. But here are some things that certainly do not make a student eligible for the alternate assessment. One that is very popular is this one that is anticipated disruptive behavior or emotional duress. Just because the student might have a outburst or things along those lines does not make the student eligible for the alternative assessment. They have to have that significant cognitive disability. And you can read the rest of those things on that list. But the anticipated disruptive behavior is one of those things that my team and I have been noticing across the state as we start looking at alternative assessment eligibility determinations. That has been used as a reason for taking the alternative assessment, and that is not advisable nor recommended for criteria. Then we get into the test administrators' requirements that they need to have prior to administering the alternative assessment. The first part here is looking at, for those of us who've done this for a little bit, there is a series of modules that you need to take. They are approximately 25-minute in length. I'm sorry, a total of about 2 hours for 6 modules. And you get through all of that, and with a standards or an average score of 80%, and you are then eligible to administer the test for your identified students. That window for viewing those modules opens on February 26th. So it's a little ways away yet, but mark your calendars if you are anticipating administering that test, February 26th. Test administrators need to complete all the required trainings to review all the manuals specific to the assessment to proctor that particular test. And I'm talking about the reading, the English language arts stuff, as well as the science piece. And we'll get into those, but John, you say we've got students who are really severe as far as abilities. And we'll get to that in a minute, but you do have to be able to, as administrators go, you have to be able to take these modules or participate in these prior to the actual administration of the test. You need to be familiar with the student. So you certainly don't want to have a situation where a student might have let's say they communicate in some type of a code with their tapping their finger or something. If the test coordinator or administrator is not aware of that type of communication, it's not a very good situation, and it creates maybe an elevated level of anxiety for everybody involved. And so you certainly want to have somebody who is familiar with the student and is able to potentially interpret some of the cues or the signals that the student might give when taking the assessment. So for considerations on the assessment, supports and accommodations should be similar to those that are available to students in the classroom for any other assessment. That goes for not only the alternative, but even for the regular assessment with accommodations. Those accommodations need to be available to students at all times. So not just the week ahead of and the week after the testing window opens or closes. So they need to be available to students. So then that way they are familiar with how to use them, how they're acquainted with the process, and perhaps could even take advantage of having some familiarity with that stuff prior to the actual test. An individualized approach needs to be taken when coming up with a test plan for those students. You need to think about the student's stamina. If we have students that are severely impacted by intellectual abilities, to expect them to sit for 3 hours at a time is not realistic to take that test. So you're going to have to be able to pace yourself and spread things out in a way that is maybe 15, 20-minute chunks, depending on the ability or the stamina that the student has. Including that sticks with then goes closely with the ability for the student to stay on task. They might only have a 15-minute window to be on task, so you just need to be aware of that. And so just pushing as a test administrator to just put your head down and help get the kid through, push them through, is not in anybody's best interest. You can pause the test at any time to take a break. Those are things that can be available to students if you notice that they're getting anxious, if they're getting uncomfortable with the situation. Maybe it's time to take a timeout. We all take timeouts in real life, and so they need to be afforded the same opportunity. Presenting a few items at a time during the test session rather than the test in its entirety, to be looking at individual pieces of that if at all possible. And then finally, practice using assessments featuring items prior to administrator on the test. So again, that is, there are some options that you can do some pre-testing activities, as well as going back to that whole thing about being familiar with some of the accommodations for the student. So for example, if you have a student who is having the test is being read for them, it shouldn't just be during that test. It should be available to them at all other times as well. Any questions? I threw in here some examples of questions that they come up with that are part of the alternative assessment. You'll see here what they look like. And again, these are just examples, but it kind of gives you an idea, especially for those of us who've never given the alternative assessment. It kind of gives you an idea of what the level of questions that are asked. If you look at this area here with regards to the standard 3-point GM and so on, the standard the 3 stands for a grade level. The GM would be geometry, and then it focuses more into domain, and not just domain, but I mean the grade, the first month, first idea, or first standard for that particular area. Does that make sense to everybody? And you can see the types of questions that are asked. Here's some sample questions for math, continuing. This would be for 3rd grade numerical operations. And you and I, chances are, already know that the chances of our students being able to answer these questions are slim to none. And that's where we're going to get in. We're coming up on a few options, or what is called the early stopping rule, to be able to know when to stop taking or administering that particular section of the test. And here's a sample question for reading. The RI stands for reading information, and for English language arts, and the types of questions that are in there. What is the main idea of this passage? And you can see. So then we get into the early stopping rule option. This is outlined in that guidance document. It needs to, if you have a student where the early stopping rule comes into play, I liken this to those of us who have if you've ever given any academic assessments, you have a stopping rule built into those Woodcock-Johnsons and the Wyatts and so on. That stopping rule is typically either 3 or 5 answers consecutively wrong, right? And so early stopping rule is similar to this. So you can have a student, your student could be there with severe impairments, taking the alternative assessment. You ask the first question, they're not able to answer it. And then you move on to the next one. And the early stopping rule, I believe, is 3. We'll get to that here in a minute. The early stopping rule is a feature that is unique to the assessment. It's not available in any of our other statewide tests. And it allows the test to stop when the student is unable to respond or give a certain number of responses incorrectly. The student response check that needs to be applied multiple times over a period of time and setting to determine whether the test can be closed early. Again, that's similar again to the repeated incorrect answers, and probably given multiple opportunities at different settings to be able to answer those questions accordingly. And as you see here, the test cannot be closed for any reason other than the lack of observable responses. If the student is determined by that student response check process. So if you have a student whose only means of communication is tapping their finger, and they're not able to give a response for that particular question, obviously you move on to the next question. So we're looking for the guidelines there. Then you are looking for a lack of an observable response. And it can only, the early stopping rule can then be applied for that situation. Cannot be applied based upon a student's behavior, their stamina, and so on. As talked about earlier, it needs to be, you need to give the student every opportunity to take that assessment. Cannot be applied if the student responds to one of the first 4 items. If the other items are administered, or if the student provides a response. That's the example I was giving you with regards to maybe the Woodcock-Johnson or the Wyatt assessments and so on, where you have to, after 4 of them, you can then stop the test and be done. Okay. This is part of that response protocol, the checklist. Does the student use one or more of these modes to communicate consistently, yes or no? If no, on step 1, you can see how this works. Administer the protocol using the modes of communication familiar to the student. If they did not have an observable response, you can see if yes, you administer the alternate assessment. If no, on step 2, open the test and administer the first 4 test items. So that's your cutoff, is those first 4. Have I completely confused everybody on that? Okay. So for right now, what is happening is we have kind of we have the SBAC assessment, which is still in play for this year. We also have going on at the same time the pilot program for the Montana alternate student test, which every school district in the state will be taking next fall. Some are taking them now, but every district, the SBAC will go away, and the MAST test will take its place. However, the alternative assessment and eligibility determination will remain. That will not change. That is still part of the process. And so as this slide is going to start talking about, just talked about this here area, the SBAC, our contract with the SBAC assessment people has expired, and we're jumping into the MAST assessment. And as I said, also the multi-state, the MSAA will continue to be the alternative for math, English language arts. I should include science in here, and as well, or that's what the AMSA is, the science assessment for the alternative students. And the science is for 5th and 8th grade only, if I remember right. So as I mentioned, eligibility determination for the MSAA remains the same. That will not change. You still have the 4 questions that will need to be asked in determining that eligibility. And I am open to questions from anybody about the alternative assessment. Here is the list of those of you who may not know. Danny McCarthy is our new statewide special ed director. Here's her contact information, and the rest of myself and my team are on this list as well for your information. If you have any questions or need to reach out to us for questions, even not even related to assessments, we are kind of jacks of all trades and are able to answer. If we cannot, we will certainly find that answer and get back to you. Are there any questions at all?
Hi, Julia Tucker here. I am just, I think I wanted to hear the information again, because I did this kind of testing last year. So I was just wondering, this is a recording that we'd be able to watch back.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome, Julia.
Hi, Julia. I just put in the chat a link for today's information. And unfortunately, the video takes me 24 hours to download and then back upload to our OPI YouTube channel. So, but John's PowerPoint is on that link that is in the chat. So if you wanted to go back and look at anything in that PowerPoint, it's available now.
Are there any questions about the material that we just covered? All right, we'll do this. We'll stop sharing. Okay, so now we're at the spot where we can just do some question and answers about IEPs. I don't really have any shortcuts or anything to provide you, but if I don't know the answer, I'll get it for you. And I'll write it down here, and we can certainly try to take care of things as they pop up. So who wants to go first if you have any questions?
Hey, John, this is Cheryl.
Hi.
I have a question regarding that is it homebound or medical IEP for a student. What is the criteria that we would need to have in place in order to change an IEP to a medical IEP, or is that just called homebound? I guess I'm getting confused on that criteria piece and then what we would call that.
Yeah, that's a good question, Cheryl. I think the medical homebound is intended to be temporary in scope, but unfortunately, it may last through the window of the testing window or that opportunity, thereby making the student unavailable to take the test. School districts are supposed to be at 95% or better as far as taking all assessments. So that person, if they were on a medical, it would be, there really isn't a criteria other than probably being bedridden and unable to come to school.
But given that, if that is the situation, there would be the need for documented medical doctor report, correct? Not just a parent report?
I would put that into some type of a PWN. Yeah.
Okay. That's
standalone or otherwise, just to at least be able to say that the student was temporarily unavailable due to medical.
okay. I have a parent who's requesting that type of IEP. And so my question is, what criteria do I need to allow that to be a homebound IEP?
Cheryl, I'm going to have to do some digging. I am not 100% on that one.
Okay, I'm just trying to get some information so that I could write that if that is
Yeah.
the case. Thank you.
You bet.
And thanks for the information on the alt test. I was wondering if we were going to have a different company or not, just based on the mask situation. So I appreciate the update very much.
You're welcome. Chris or Mercy, do either of you have any additional things to add for Cheryl's question, or do you know right off the top?
Not right off the top of my head, no.
Okay.
But I think you did a really good job giving an overview, John.
Well, thanks.
Yeah. You betcha.
No, Cheryl, I made a note here about the homebound criteria and what that ought to look like, and I'll get back to you. Okay,
Sounds good. Thank you.
you bet. Other questions?
A very
Oh,
quiet
you're
group today, John.
We do. It's you guys letting me off the hook pretty easily. I appreciate it, though. Not feeling 100%. You might be able to hear it in my voice a little bit, but I hope I can continue to talk as needed. But you're making it easy on me. Thank you.
Well, we don't have to keep everybody for the full hour. We can still do your certificates. We've hit the 40-minute mark, which I think is the minimum criteria. So if there are no other questions, I will be sending out certificates tomorrow morning, and John's video recording will be available as well tomorrow. Next month in February, we will be doing PBIS with Joe Moriarty and Keith Hoyer. So I hope that many of you will come back and join us for that topic.
I can stay on here for a little bit, Ann, until everybody. You and I will probably be the last ones to tap out here. If anybody has a